Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Julie Evener, and I'm presenting today on launching a library-sponsored open access interprofessional journal, Lessons Learned. I'm the Director for Content Management and Discovery at USF Health Libraries at the University of South Florida. I'm also an Associate Editor for the Journal of Innovation in Health Sciences Education. The rest of the team for this presentation includes Dr. Elizabeth McGee, who is the Senior Director of Clinical Learning and Innovation at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, and also the Editor-in-Chief for the Journal of Innovation in Health Sciences Education, and Dr. Genevieve P. Zip, who is the Program Director for the PhD in Health Sciences program at Seton Hall University, as well as the Director for the Center for Interprofessional Education in Health Sciences at Seton Hall University, and is also an Associate Editor for the Journal of Innovation in Health Sciences Education. Today I'm going to walk you through the process we followed to launch a library-sponsored open access journal and share the lessons we learned along the way. Please note the Code of Conduct for the Charleston Library Conference. Scan the QR code to see the full thing. Please also note the accessibility policies of the Charleston Conference. First, some context for the journal. The Journal of Innovation in Health Sciences Education, or JESSE, is a peer-reviewed open access journal focused on transformational educational approaches, emerging instructional technologies, and outcome-focused teaching and learning innovation in health sciences education, whether that's face-to-face, virtual, or hybrid. It's published through the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences Library and hosted on bPress's Digital Commons platform. The aims of JESSE include to promote transformational educational approaches among health professionals, illuminate outcome-driven teaching and learning innovation within health sciences education, and advance the application of evidence-based and technology-rich teaching approaches. This slide shows some examples of topics within the scope of JESSE, the first two columns. The final column is a list of the types of articles JESSE may accept for publication. Launching this journal was a long, sometimes circuitous process. From idea to first issue was 3 years. We put in a lot of work before the journal even technically existed. Of course, it all started with an idea, which happened in February 2021. Then we had to create the guiding documents for the journal and submit an application for the sponsoring institution to approve. We designated the editorial board and designed the website. Finally, we were ready to solicit manuscripts and recruit peer reviewers. We started receiving submissions, which had to go through the review process. And all of this had to happen before we published our first article in February 2024. As we go through this session, I'll address each of these stops along our path in more detail and share lessons learned at each point. At the time of this recording, we've published 2 full issues and are working on reviewing the manuscripts for our 3rd issue to be published before the end of 2024. Back in early 2021, I was the Director of Library Services at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences. We had been working on growing our digital publishing arm through Digital Commons, with 2 journals being published through the library, a student-run occupational therapy journal, and a partnership with a physical therapy professional association to publish their official journal. At the same time, leadership was promoting university-wide discussions about innovation, and we were setting departmental and unit goals for the new year that aligned with that university-wide focus. The library was part of the Teaching, Learning, and Innovation Department, which also included digital media, instructional designers, and clinical learning. 3 of us within that larger department discussed the idea of launching an innovation-focused peer-reviewed journal. We started meeting with Eric Robinson, who was the scholarly communications librarian at the time, and had successfully led 2 other journals to launch at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences. He walked us through the early stages of coalescing our scattered thoughts and ideas into a workable plan. For example, one early step was to determine what we wanted the focus of the journal to be. We already knew innovation, but health sciences education was a natural fit because of the type of institution in which we worked. We did some searching online to determine what other journals were out there with a similar focus and really identify whether we were filling a gap with this journal idea and finding our niche. We found some journals with related focuses, but none exactly like what we envisioned. Another aspect of this that the scholarly communications librarian walked us through was the requirement that any journal published through the library on Digital Commons be an open access journal. We considered that in our niche finding as well. For example, if there had been another journal out there with a near identical focus, but it was not open access, we would have still felt there was room for our journal in the landscape, since it would provide an open access option. We also did a lot of Googling to determine a title that would describe the contents of the journal, but not overlap with other journals already out there. As a part of all this, we established the aims and scope of the journal to help us better understand our purpose as we moved forward. After establishing the title, aims, and scope of the journal, the scholarly communications librarian walked us through creating a number of guiding documents. First was a memorandum of understanding that outlined the roles and objectives of each party, the library and the publishing partner, in launching this journal. For example, it outlined that the university library would host the journal free of charge, maintain the publishing platform, provide assistance and guidance with journal setup, and more. For our part, the editorial board would take responsibility for the content of the journal, submit to ethical oversight and adhere to ethical standards, and agree to not charge article processing fees, submission fees, or the like, among other things. This clearly outlined what responsibilities belong to the library as publisher and what responsibilities belong to the journal by way of the editorial board. We also wrote extensive bylaws for the journal, using templates and examples from other journals as a starting point. The bylaws cover concepts such as the composition of the editorial board, the minimum qualifications required to be on the board and to be editor-in-chief, the frequency and format of editorial board meetings, the responsibilities of each member of the editorial board, and voting procedures. Likewise, we developed our journal policies using boilerplates and examples from other journals, making decisions to match the goals and preferences we had for our journal. The policies created include submission requirements, standards for listed authorship, an open access statement, attribution and usage policies, including Creative Commons 4.0, author rights, copyright, formatting requirements, which we did APA, disclosing conflicts of interest, a plagiarism policy, confidentiality, peer review process, an archival policy, and crossmark policy for corrections and retractions, and a policy for reporting misconduct. Ethical considerations were a very important part of the process and were woven throughout the MOU, bylaws, and journal policies. In the current scholarly publishing landscape, it was important to us to make sure it was clear that this journal operates under strong ethical requirements and avoid any of the red flags associated with predatory journals. For example, we made sure to list a real physical address on our contact page, as well as contact and ORCID information for each member of the editorial board. Of course, crafting specific and particular aims and scopes are part of this as well, as is clearly outlining the peer review process. All of these pieces, plus more, are particularly important for a brand new journal. If submitters are going to take a chance on an upstart journal, they need to know that the journal is legitimate and that it's following stringent ethical standards, such as those outlined by the Committee on Publication Ethics, or COPE, the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association, and the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. As we moved through these steps, the project came to the attention of the University of St. Augustine's C-suite leadership in a way that the two journals previously set up for publication through the library had not. The chief academic officer had concerns around the project, mostly related to wanting to make sure everything was done in a high quality and ethical way, since the journal would, in a way, represent the university publishing, even if officially the university was just the publisher. After several discussions, the library and the CAO developed an official digital journal publishing proposal process that, starting with our journal and going forward, any journal interested in publishing through the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences Library would need to complete and be approved by the university's Executive Leadership Committee. We started this process in August 2021. Though it was an unexpected step and did slow down our timeline, it was ultimately helpful for our journal and to establish an official process for the future of digital publishing at the institution. The proposal process included providing documentation for the journal's editorial leadership, including CVs, aims and scope, journal staffing and bylaws, and clarifying the editor's commitment to ethical scholarship and publishing practices. The Executive Leadership Committee wanted to confirm the qualifications of the editorial board members, including their experience with research. We presented our application in an Executive Leadership Committee, and they approved us to move forward. The editorial board was something we established from the beginning, but it expanded and shifted throughout the process of launching the journal. The initial editorial board consisted of the three of us employed at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences who had the idea for the journal in the first place. This included myself and Dr. Elizabeth McGee, who was voted early on to be the editor-in-chief. In our discussions as we were writing our bylaws, we acknowledged that we would eventually need to add editors to the board as the journal matured. We wrote in instructions for how to add members to the editorial board. One of the suggestions that came out of the journal application process was the recommendation to add an editorial board member not affiliated with the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences sooner rather than later. This recommendation made sense to us as we are sensitive to ensuring the journal doesn't look like a vanity press. Elizabeth reached out to Dr. Genevieve Zip from Seton Hall University, and following the bylaws we set, we voted her in as a fourth editorial board member. Both the MOU and the bylaws require that at least one editorial board member must be a faculty member affiliated with the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences. To start, our editorial board included 3 University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences employees, then moved to 3 employees and 1 non-employee. Then when I left the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences in June 2023, the board was split with 2 USAHS employees and 2 non-employees. Finally, after we launched the journal this year, we decided to add another editorial board member to better split the work. This new member is a USAHS faculty member, putting our current editorial board at 5 people representing 3 different institutions. It's also worth noting that all editorial board members were asked to complete training on using the Digital Commons platform, predatory publishing, best practices for scholarly publishing, copyright, and Creative Commons. Another large step in preparing to launch the journal was designing and creating the website, both on the front end and the back end where the editors and peer reviewers would do our work. This was done in conjunction with Digital Commons. We started by filling out a Digital Commons journal setup form, which had us make selections for the desired journal URL, category for the journal, for example, peer-reviewed journal, formatting and workflow details, and more. We also gave basic instructions for the website design. We worked with the marketing department at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences to create a title logo and header banner for the journal, and we included those files with the setup form. We went through several rounds of designs with the Digital Commons team before we landed on one we were totally happy with. Digital Commons created a sandbox site for us with that design where we could ensure all the information was correct and practice with the backend platform, which is called Etiquette, before we went live. We also shared the sandbox site with several trusted colleagues unaffiliated with the journal to provide feedback on the clarity of the information and provide feedback that all links worked as expected. We took their feedback into account and made a final round of changes. By May 2023, we were ready to push the site live and start soliciting manuscripts for the journal. We set up a LinkedIn page for the journal and created a digital flyer for submissions, with editorial board members sharing the flyer on their own accounts as well. We also emailed several relevant listservs, including the Medical Libraries discussion list and discussion lists for medical professionals and instructors. We also shared about the journal within the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, and these efforts definitely had an impact because many of our first submissions came from University of St. Augustine authors. That has remained true, and we've committed to accepting manuscripts that are high quality and relevant, but also to balance the USAHS and non-USAHS articles in each issue. We decided to accept and publish submissions on a rolling basis, grouping together issues based on month of publication and dividing the calendar year into 3 issues. Articles published from January to April are issue 1, May through August are issue 2, and September through December are issue 3. While we may change to publishing all the articles in an issue at once in the future, the rolling model works well for us now because we don't have so many submissions that we're rejecting manuscripts due to space. We're still honing our marketing tactics and experimenting to find the best ways to get the word out and to encourage researchers to submit their manuscripts to us. Having 2 issues published and visible definitely helps. We have enough of a flow of manuscripts coming in now that we feel confident about being able to publish 3 to 4 articles per issue, but of course we'd like to get to the point of having larger issues than that and a good pipeline of manuscripts 1 to 2 issues out. Another challenge has been recruiting peer reviewers with the expertise to adequately review the manuscripts we receive. At the start, we used many of the same tactics to recruit peer reviewers as we did to solicit manuscripts. We combined posts on listservs to ask for manuscripts and peer reviewers at the same time. When individuals reach out to us to express interest in peer reviewing, we ask them for their CV to make sure they have experience with conducting and publishing research. If they do, we add them to our databank of peer reviewers, which is a function of the Digital Commons publishing platform, and we add notes to indicate their areas of expertise. Then, when we as editors need to assign manuscripts to peer reviewers, we can easily see which reviewers are a good match for the subject matter of the manuscript. In October of 2023, as part of our efforts to build our pool of peer reviewers, we hosted a free webinar that provided an overview of peer reviewing in general, but also specifically for Jessie. In the 40-minute webinar, we covered things like an introduction to Jessie, including our aims and scope, an overview of the reviewing process step by step, recommendations for peer reviewers before they accept a review, a 4-step method for peer reviewing, and what to include in the peer reviewer report, as well as recommendations for further training and how to sign up to be a peer reviewer with Jessie. The content of the training and the recommendations for further training came from free self-paced courses through the Web of Science Academy, including an introduction to peer review and reviewing in the sciences, as well as through Elsevier Researcher Academy sessions, including certified peer reviewer course and becoming a peer reviewer. It's important to note that we decided not to require our peer reviewers to complete specific training because, again, as a new journal, we don't want to make it more difficult to find reviewers, and we think if we require specific training, we'll have fewer reviewers willing to commit. However, we do send new peer reviewers the recording of our webinar and recommend that they watch it, and we recommend additional trainings if they ask. We found that most inexperienced peer reviewers are eager to do a good job and want more information. As our journal grows, we plan to revisit the idea of requiring our peer reviewers to complete a specific external training and submitting their completion certificate to us in order to be assigned manuscripts. For now, we as the editors are paying close attention to the reviews that are submitted to ensure they are well done. We also have used personal connections to recruit peer reviewers, especially when manuscripts come in that are difficult to match with any of our current peer reviewers. In this case, we reach out individually to the potential peer reviewer, explain the opportunity we have with this submitted manuscript, and ask if they'd be willing to peer review. This has worked well. Another way we've built our peer review databank is through our current peer reviewers. We had one peer reviewer who was unable to accept a review we asked of him due to his schedule at the time, but he recommended two other researchers who might be a good fit. We then reached out to those two and explained that the first researcher had recommended them and asked if they'd be willing to peer review, and they agreed. One challenge we faced, and that I think is a challenge for many journals, is finding peer reviewers with good expertise in quantitative data analysis who can critically evaluate that piece of submitted manuscripts to ensure quality. One last point I want to make regarding peer review is that one action we took early on was to create a rubric for the peer reviewers. This is a document that we also make available to researchers submitting manuscripts to the journal, and that reviewers fill out as a part of their reviewer report. The authors see the reviewer comments in the rubric. We started with a rubric that's a good fit for research articles. For example, does the methods section include a description of design and rationale? And then just recently realized that the same rubric is not a good fit for article types like analysis papers, practice guidelines, and position papers. So we made a second rubric more suited to articles that aren't sharing original research. It includes questions like, does this section include evidence from the expert opinion or previous research to support arguments or recommendations? And does this section include limitations of the arguments and recommendations? As we started receiving manuscript submissions, we needed to establish our own internal workflows of who does what from submission through publication. We've honed this workflow over the last year or so through trial and error and discussions in our editor meetings about what's working and what's confusing for us in the process. First, a manuscript is submitted. Elizabeth, our editor-in-chief, does a very basic review of the manuscript. Is it aligned with our scope and aims? Is there a cover letter and does it have the information that we need? Then Elizabeth assigns the article to one of the associate editors based on current assignments and areas of specialty. The associate editor first uses Authenticate to do a plagiarism check on the article. We discussed early on at what point the plagiarism check should happen, and ultimately we decided that doing it early would save time and effort later. If an article fails the plagiarism check, we can send it back to the authors before ever assigning a peer reviewer. I had an article assigned to me recently that did not do well through the plagiarism check, though honestly it was more an issue of not citing and not using quotation marks than outright nefarious plagiarism. And I was able to immediately send it back to the authors, highlighting the points of concern and recommending how they could fix it and resubmit. It was good to be able to take care of that early in the process so that if the authors were unable or unwilling to make the changes, we didn't have to waste peer reviewer time on the manuscript. After the plagiarism check, the associate editor makes sure the manuscript is de-identified, no identifying names or institutions. And then they search our databank of peer reviewers and choose two that are a good fit for the manuscript, and they assign the reviews. Peer reviewers have 14 days to accept or reject the request, with a reminder sent after 7 days. If they reject or don't respond at all, the associate editor again reviews the databank and assigns a new peer reviewer. The peer reviewers have 30 days to complete their review after they accept. When both reviews have been submitted, the associate editor analyzes the reviews along with the manuscript and registers a decision: accept article submission with minor revisions, major revisions required for acceptance, and reject article submission. At this point, minor or major revisions are the most common decisions. It's rare that we accept an article outright after peer review, and rare that we reject it altogether. We do reject articles, but so far that has mostly happened during the editor-in-chief review due to the manuscript being outside the aims and scope of the journal. With the registered decision, the authors receive the peer reviewer reports and any additional comments or recommendations from the associate editor. The authors then revise and resubmit the manuscript. This step is usually what takes the most time. Once the authors resubmit, the associate editor analyzes the new manuscript against the recommendations. Sometimes the recommendations are not applied or not applied to the associate editor's satisfaction, so the manuscript is sent back to the authors for more revisions. This is repeated until the associate editor is satisfied with the changes. When that happens, the associate editor registers a new decision usually accept article submission at this point. And then the associate editor sends the manuscript to the copy editor for proofreading and formatting. Right now, I'm doubling as the sole copy editor for our journal since I have a good deal of experience with this. But in the future, we hope to have volunteer copy editors join our team to take care of this process. This is also the point where we reach out to the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences Library for a DOI for the article. Once the article is copy edited and formatted, it goes back to the authors one more time for their final approval. Then the editor-in-chief looks it over and gives her final approval, and then it's published. We were excited to publish our first article in February 2024, just 3 years after starting this journey to launch a new journal. The first issue included 2 articles published in February and 1 article published in April. After that, we closed the first issue and published 4 articles in our second issue in May, June, July, and August. We currently, as of this recording at the end of October, have several articles in the various stages working their way toward publication in our third issue. In several areas, including marketing to increase submissions and the peer reviewer pool, as well as our behind-the-scenes workflow, we're still learning as we go and making adjustments as needed in a trial and error fashion. Though I've shared lessons learned throughout this presentation, one key piece of advice for anyone embarking on a similar journey is to determine how long you think it will take to launch the journal, and then multiply that number by at least 3. When we started out in February 2021, we had an ambitious plan to have at least 1 article published by the end of that year. Due to day-to-day activities and responsibilities and the bumps and challenges we encountered along the way, our first article wasn't published until February 2024, 3 years after we initially started the process. It was frustrating at times during those early years to be working so hard and dedicating so much time to this journal without anything to really show for it. Until the website went live in March 2023, we couldn't even point to our names on the editorial board page as proof of our efforts. Also, saying it will take more time than you think pertains to how much day-to-day effort is involved in the work of launching a journal. The workload now that we've launched is more manageable because we already did the work of creating a journal from scratch. It's much different being a founding editor of a new journal than joining the editorial team of an already established journal. During that unanticipated journal approval process we went through with the hosting institution, the CAO asked each of us on the editorial board to really reflect thoughtfully on our commitments and workload and determine whether we had the time and energy to take this on in addition to all our other work and personal responsibilities. We felt we did, and no regrets, but his request for us to reflect was a wise one. Another recommendation is to lean on the experts around you. This project would have gone absolutely nowhere if not for the scholarly communications librarian Eric Robinson, who guided us through the early stages of setup and development. While I am also a librarian with an above average amount of knowledge about scholarly communications compared to non-librarians, Eric is truly an expert, and his passion for this work and commitment to quality and ethical publication shone through everything that we did. We also leaned on marketing professionals at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, and though it wasn't their role or their responsibility to create full-on marketing plans for us, they did help us design our title logo and website header. Our contacts at Digital Commons have also done heavy lifting along the way, from designing the site to training us and answering questions. Finally, we had some colleagues who are experts in research who looked at our website and our plans and gave us great feedback on how to improve before we launched. As with most collaborative projects, communication has been and remains important for our team. At times, we were all learning together, and at times, one of us could help buoy up the others. But talking through challenges and issues along the way has been crucial. Despite the delays, frustrations, learning curves, and time and effort involved in launching a new peer-reviewed open access journal, for me it has been well worth it. The satisfaction in publishing that first issue and in overseeing a submitted manuscript through revisions and onto final publication has been immense. We still have a long way to go in polishing and maturing our journal, but I'm excited for the journey ahead as much as for the journey behind us. We want to take a minute to acknowledge by name some of the individuals who've been most influential along our journey to launching this journal. The first two are our other two editorial board members. Thank you so much for your attention today, and we are open to answering questions now.